Well, welcome back, and Dave Dotterrer is back in the studio with us today, and Dave has been involved in the legislature 3 sessions now, Dave?
Yep. 3
sessions, and this last go-around, you were kind of the liaison between the 2 Republican caucuses, between the House and the Senate, primarily as it relates to budget issues, right?
That's correct.
Your overall lesson you learned, what did you think of the process? Is it like making sausage?
Yeah, it really is. It very much is, and the other thing that you notice is that knowledge really is power. Mm-hmm. And you see people who know how to work the system, and I'll keep this information to myself, and the excuse is this. Well, we didn't get to that until the very end of the session, so then we had to make this quick decision because we got to get out of town. Mm-hmm. If you're cynical, you'll say, oh, they just held the decision until the end, spring it on everybody, and we need to get out of here. Yeah. I think that's a combination of a certain amount of cynicism and manipulation, mm-hmm. and on the other hand, there's a certain amount of they're not very good at scheduling up there. Okay. I mean, you watch that and you say, well, you know what the start date is, and you know what your end date is. Can't you sort of back plan and say, we need to have the K-12 budget passed by this date?
Yeah, right.
That kind of thing.
Well, your military training, you're very regiment.
That's right.
A, B, C, D, and then all of a sudden you get up there and everything's liquid.
Well, that's right. That's right, and I recognize that. And so sometimes I say, now don't be too hard on these guys, because it's a legislative process, not an executive process. I was involved in it in a executive process, mm-hmm. and we didn't have 90 independent elected officials, all of whom have their own opinions on things and how it ought to happen, as opposed to, at the end of the day, I was the colonel and I made the decision, and that's where we went. My Marine said, okay, Colonel, that's the way it was. Well, that doesn't happen in a legislature, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's fine. That's the way a legislature should work. You expect your representatives to represent you, and there to be huge differences of opinion like that.
Dave, you were involved in the previous session where it was split.
Yeah.
Which was perhaps one of the most productive sessions we've ever seen, in that they got along, they had to get along, they co-chaired all these major committees, and things happened. The next go around, the Democrats certainly were in the majority in the House and the Senate, and they had the governorship, and
you watched it and you thought, now wait a minute, you would think that with a 50-50 split like that, or a co-governance model, that wouldn't work. I mean, there was a lot of people who said, well, I don't think this is going to work. I mean, somebody's got to be in the majority. Yeah. Well, guess what? That's not what happened.
Yeah.
They really did make it work. And so I really was, I was disappointed, quite frankly, in this session. Yeah, it bothered me a lot to watch this, and it wasn't a matter of that the minority has no input. It's that it really is not, bipartisanship is not built into the process.
Right.
It happens episodically, and only if a few people want it to happen. And as opposed to, now wait a minute, we have, for example, on the Senate side, if you look at the numbers, 47% of the Senate is the minority. Right. Well, that's pretty close to 50, so okay.
Let's get along.
Let's get along here. And they did better. They did better in the House. There's no doubt about that.
You would think that after coming through the session where it was 50-50, mm-hmm. they learned some cooperation and collaboration, that just by gentlemanly being courteous would carry over into a session, but it didn't.
It did. No, it did. It didn't at all.
So at the end of the day, it's really pretty hard and clad.
Yeah, it really is. And I don't want to make it sound like it was all bad. No, there was collaboration, and people they talked to each other and things like that. And on the other hand, if you're in the majority, you do have it is a legitimate position for you to say, well, we did win the election and we're in charge, so okay, I got it. But that's that doesn't mean that you exclude the other side. Let me give you an example. I was greatly surprised that the co-chairs put together their budget blueprint at the beginning of the session, and they put it together, and they essentially never went to Dennis Richardson, who had just done it with the same two people, and at least at some point gone to him and said, hey, Dennis, what do you think we ought to do? What's your input? What are your thoughts? And here's where we're going. What do you think? Now, They don't have to take his advice. They don't have to do anything about it. But you would think just, A, as a courtesy, and also it's just smart business to go, let's go get a second opinion. We may not be right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I would have done things. I would have, if I would have at least asked them for their opinion. Again, you don't have to take it.
It didn't happen.
No, it didn't. And that's a problem.
It seems to me that it's got to be extremely frustrating. You only got so much money coming in, and you have these demands on all this money. And you just can't figure out how to handle it. It just kind of goes, well, wait a minute, we can't spend more than we take in, but they seem to be bent on doing that.
Yeah, the system is designed to do two things. First, spend all the money you have, and secondly, figure out how to rationalize that you need more.
Okay.
In other words, because there's all these groups out there, all these agencies, all these groups, and there's some conservatives. It's not just liberals, but I mean, there's all kinds of groups out there that have. You know what? If you just gave us a little bit more money, look how much more good we could do.
Yeah. And
there's that tremendous pressure. And the answer is, you got to learn to say no.
But the Democrats will always figure out a way to raise a fee, raise a tax, do something.
Yeah. They did that. I mean, they built it into their. What I found very surprising was, at the very beginning of the session, they came up with a budget blueprint and said, we need $275 million in additional revenue, taxes, to make this budget work. Okay? Don't agree with that, but okay, that's your blueprint. Then later on, they get a revenue forecast plus a slight tax increase that gives them $290 million. So they're $15 million to the good, and then they come back and say, well, we need at least another $200 million. Well, wait a minute.
Yeah.
You had this budget plan that said you got more than you said you needed. Now all of a sudden you need more.
Yeah.
And that's the way it's just, that's the I guess the best way to describe that, that's the inertia that's there.
Is it possible, and I don't want to be oversimplistic here, but is it possible, like from a business standpoint, the governor can say, wait a minute, I believe across the board in state government there's at least 10% waste. I'm going to cut everybody's budget 10%. Could it survive?
Well, yeah, they would survive. I'm not sure that that's probably, having been in the Washington bureaucracy when they've done that.
Yeah.
I mean, I've watched that happen. For example, I was in the Pentagon one time where they walked in and Congress said, you will all cut your headquarters staff 10%. Okay. Okay. Now, okay, so where did you come up with the 10%? Well, we sort of thought you had too many people. So, and so, particularly as a Marine, since we're pretty lean, you start slicing 10% out of the Marine Corps, and it really hurts.
Right.
Now, if there's an Army guy sitting here, we'd say, well, that's unfair. Of course not. You guys are no leaner than we are. Come on. You can hear. So, anyways, that would be the argument. You could do it. Would state government survive? Yeah. Of course it would.
The only reason I ask that and bring that scenario up, we all know there's waste and there's just a lot of bureaucratic stuff that goes on. I mean, have you ever tried to go in and get a plan through a county or a city or a state or get a government agency to act in any lightning speed? The answer is no. No. So what could we do to
well,
make it more
interestingly, now there is, for example, the governor requested, and the legislature built into this budget, there is I forget the exact numbers, but there's built into this budget a reduction in every agency's budget. Operating budget for what he believes that he can achieve a 2% operating efficiency. Administrative efficiency, overhead efficiency. Now that's, and that of course depends on the program, because some programs have very little overhead. The money is, sent out to the counties or out to the needy or something like that. On the other ones that they have huge overhead. But I will say that kind of struck me like that's sort of along the lines. It's a shotgun approach, but sometimes, sometimes you just got to do it.
I know.
Dave
Dotterer's with us. We're going to take a quick break. We'll come back. Is there a special session in the horizon? We'll talk to him about that and what ended up being the PERS policy. We'll talk to him about that when we get right back. Okay, we're back. with Dave Dotterrer, and Dave is really a special guy because he is, I don't think anybody has done what you've done by being a liaison between the Republican caucus on the House side and the Republican caucus on the Senate side in the Oregon legislature. And you were kind of like the budget hawk, you know, you watch it. What an incredible experience, you know.
Oh, it's really interesting to see the differences in personalities, and you know, they may have similar political philosophies in a lot of ways, but they're just different groups of people, and the Senate is not the House, and vice versa. I mean, they're just different animals. It's interesting to watch that. It was.
All right, now we all watched. I had Dennis here. He gave it a very low grade. I don't know what you gave this last session, but Dennis gave it a very low grade. And you would too?
I would too. Yeah.
A D?
I give it a C minus. I'm not quite as hard as Dennis.
Okay. Well, it's still not a healthy score.
No, it's not. And no, he's seen a lot more than I have.
Yeah.
And so I got to go with what he's got.
Okay.
There's no doubt about that.
PERS was the big issue, and they seem to kick the can down the road. I mean, sooner or later, we got to deal with this, and we got to cut it down.
You know, when I went back up, I had gone back up to Salem, I sat down and talked with. We have this really bright young man, homeschooled by the way, just graduated from Willamette Law School, got his law degree, or passed the bar, and now he works in the Senate Republican office. Bright young man, and he is their PERS guy, and he went to this latest PERS board, and the PERS actuarial people, which is a private company that does this across the nation, very, very well respected. And these are the number geeks. These are the widget people, the geek people. They said that there's a slightly better than 50% chance that in the next 20 years the Oregon PERS system will fail.
Will implode, huh?
Yeah, and so anytime somebody says to you that let's just round it back down to 50%. That there's a 50% chance that your system is going to fail, you better listen to that real closely. Now, of course, we don't know the future, but if I said to you, well, there's a 10% chance, you'd go, well, okay, that's okay. You know, there's a 10% chance I'll get hit by lightning, or maybe or something like that.
Right.
You know, but when something gets up to 50%, you go, and these are the actuarial experts that are doing these numbers. You say, you know what? We better listen to these people.
Well, look at Detroit.
Yes.
I mean, it's primarily a PERS issue, isn't it, that took the city down?
Well, it's benefits.
Yeah.
It's benefits.
Yeah.
And so again, they did the PERS Lite, and they really didn't do that much with it. I mean, you're right. They kicked the can down the road on almost half of what the quote savings were, which is going to end up actually costing the system more over the long haul. But it does help you with your budget problem in the immediate. So we're looking at just the immediate, not the long term. And the PERS board is making some changes. This guy told me, he said, you wait until the PERS board comes out in September. They're going to give their first numbers for the next budget cycle. And it's not going to be pretty again, because we didn't do that much.
I would assume that the average citizen in Oregon who are not benefited by PERS has no idea what this mess is about. Therefore, it never really gets pressured.
You know, it's kind of
excuse me. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's interesting that you are really seeing an awful lot of Oregonians that are looking at this and saying, you know, wait a minute here. You know, they see Detroit, and it's a horribly complex system. It's a horribly complex problem, but I mean, just the basic idea that, you know, you need to do something substantial here to fix this. I really believe the majority of Oregonians get that, and I wouldn't expect them to.
Well, I think we get the idea that we can't afford it,
yes,
but we don't know how to fix it, because no matter where you cut, you're going to get hammered.
Well, that's true. That's true, and I would say that, for example, when I looked at it, I said, you know, let's not get into initially an argument over the details of which little pieces we work with. You have to get to that eventually. But let's just talk about the number. Let's talk about the big picture. This PERS Lite, just to throw some numbers at you, only saves $420 million over this biennium. And the original Republican proposal was $2 billion. Well, okay. Now We
went from $2 billion down to $400 million.
$400 million. Now you could make the argument. Okay, well let's split the difference and make it 1.2. Okay, that's a good compromise.
Yeah.
1.2 billion still bigger than 400 million, and that would actually, that number would have reduced a PERS employer's rates in some way.
Wow.
What this does is it just doesn't, their PERS rates go up, they just don't go up as much. Okay, you could say, well, we saved some money. Well, okay, yeah, but you had all those big increases over the last few years. You're not undoing that. So again, those are kind of, I like to look strategically first at the big picture and say, where do we need to be? Well, we need to be at a big number. Okay, now how do we get there?
All right, let's is this political? Because it seems to me that if they have to go back into session to settle PERS, that could backfire on the Democrats going into re-election because they didn't take care of it. And once the PERS comes out and all these numbers come out again in a special session, and they don't do anything about it, or they're forced to make even bigger cuts and compromises, that's not going to play to their base very well.
No, it's not. No, it's not. No, it's all political.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, of course it is. It's a democracy.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think there's some serious-minded people up there that really do understand, just from a policy standpoint, look, we really got to do something here.
Do you expect a special session?
No.
Really?
I don't expect it. I mean, I give it maybe a 1 in 3 chance. I mean, it doesn't mean it isn't going to happen, but I give it certainly less than a 50-50 chance of happening, because there's this talk about this grand bargain, and you know, the Republicans need to have need to agree to a tax increase. Here's the way I view that. What the Democrats have essentially done is they've threatened and made good on their threat not to pass needed, necessary PERS reform that they have the majority votes for, unless the Republicans give them the supermajority votes for an unnecessary tax increase.
Oh, geez.
And so you look at that and you say, well, I can walk away from that deal.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and then anytime you're the bad guy.
Yeah, and you're the bad guy. Well,
Right.
wait a minute.
Yeah.
There's no deal here. If you the Democrats believe that you need PERS reform, then put it on the table, and if it's big enough, you'll get a lot of Republican votes.
Right.
If you do just another little incremental change, I'll bet you'll pick up some Republican votes. You may not pick up a majority, but you know, you'll pick up some, and you can then claim it's bipartisan and move on.
Where's the governor on this?
Well, he's still talking about he wants a grand bargain. He wants a grand deal, and he's moving toward a little bit of, he's now put on the table a proposal dealing with the Republicans, if you remember, wanted a small business tax cut to help the small businesses. And so he's put a counter proposal on the table dealing with some capital gains. But the Republicans are going back and saying, well, now wait a minute. That doesn't help small business. I mean, this helps big business. It helps Nike, but it doesn't help the mom and pop that are sitting around a kitchen table saying, you know, dear, why don't we start a business that does this? That takes, you know, some real tax reform, and that would not take capital away from them. And
all right. So if we're tied up all this PERS debate, which is, you know, really more for me, it's the end of the argument. In the meantime, we still have high unemployment in the state. We're not attracting new businesses. What happened to the jobs argument?
Virtually nothing was done. I mean, I watched that with fascination, because if you looked at the press releases from everybody at the beginning of the session, it was jobs in the economy, jobs in the economy.
Right.
And then you started looking at what was being worked on. Well, we worked on the budget, and we worked on PERS and everything, but you sort of were waiting for, well, okay, somebody put a proposal on the table that truly is going to create jobs and improve the economy. And it just never happened. And it was partially, again, back to my disappointment with the process. What I watched the legislature do is the immediate overwhelms the important. And you have to pass a budget. I got it. But that doesn't mean you can't pass a budget and also look at these bigger issues.
Right.
And they're not, the legislature is not very good at multitasking, I guess is the best way to describe it. They didn't do anything on it.
I don't want to sound partisan here. I'm just trying to figure out what's in the brain of a liberal that would want to spend what they don't have. What's the deal? Am I missing something here?
Well, you know, remember, part of that idea is, you know, we can always raise taxes on some group of people that are well off.
And there goes the jobs.
Well, yeah, got it. But that's your argument. Their argument is, well, this is about redistributing income. What I can't understand is, why do you believe that if I take money away from a rich person and give it to the government, I'm redistributing income? I'm not. You know, you're just giving it to bureaucrats at that point. Now, eventually, that money might go down to some poor person and some program. I got it. I'm okay. You know, but it's the same thing. I'm always fascinated by watching that and thinking, how is giving money to the government a redistribution of income?
All right. Yeah. Let's say there's a turnover this next session. I mean, you're going into the campaign season. The primary's in May. Election next November. What if the Republicans picked up one of the houses? Say that. Well, I don't know. The House. What's the spread in the House now?
It's 34-26. There's a four. That's pretty good. Now the Senate is 16-14. That could. You know, you're only one apart. That could change. That could change. Yeah.
So if one of the houses was won, it changes the picture, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I would like to think we would go back to the last session when you did have that bipartisan. I can't make you do this, but I can stop you. So let's talk here now.
Yeah.
And, you know, okay. You know, that's a really dumb idea. Let me put something else on the table here. Well, that's a dumb idea too. Okay. Well, let's compromise. And we'll figure this out.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I just think that you know, we got to figure this thing out, because we're not attracting jobs. I mean, you drive around Jackson County. We are not recovering. Yeah, there's some building going on. There's some good things going on, but will we ever get back to where we were 10 years ago?
No. I mean, I grew up in Eugene, and you know, I go away for almost 30 years in the Marine Corps. When I came back, and I drive around town, and I go, well, this isn't the town I left.
Yeah.
I mean, all the lumber mills are gone. I mean, you know, you just go, this is crazy.
Well, Dave, thanks for your service in making yourself available and volunteering to do that job. I know it's been an incredible education, and we look forward to bigger and better things for you in the future.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Okay. All right, we'll see you next time on Focus Today.